So let's suppose that you've trained the deterioration model on a real dataset, and you want to validate the performance of this model. This is possible by going to the real data validation toolbox, which we can access by going to the analysis menu in OpenIPDM, and we click on the validate real data. So by clicking on this, we would open the real data validation toolbox. This toolbox takes two inputs in general. It takes the parameters that we've estimated and the database that we have. Now we start with the parameters on the top with the inspector's parameters. So we click on load, and then we go to the parameters that we've got from the model training toolbox. So we double click on this to load it. Then we move on to the next input, which is the inspector's ID. And as you notice, there's between brackets there's full. So there are two types of inspectors ID files. There's the filtered inspectors, and there's the all inspectors or the inspectors ID full. And the difference between these is that at the stage where we are preparing the dataset for the training process, we eliminate some of the inspection points or the inspection data that seems to be noisy or unrealistic. So we've defined some criteria already documented in published work. And based on these criteria, we eliminate some of the inspection data. Now, because of this elimination process, there are some or few inspectors that could be eliminated. And these inspectors are eliminated because they have performed the inspections either once or twice, very limited number of times. So they have very limited inspection data, and that's why they will be removed in the filtered list of inspectors ID. However, the full list contains all the IDs for all the inspectors. So that's the difference. After that, after the explanation, we go ahead and load the file. So the file exists in the database that we've extracted. So all inspectors ID data, we double click on that, we load it. And then we move on to loading the regression model parameters. So we go ahead and load this file from the model training toolbox. After that, we see that we have here two inputs, and these two inputs are really for the database. Now the purpose, as you see, there's one input with the old database, and the other input is new database, is that the validation process will be based on two databases that are entirely the same, except that they are provided at different years. So like, for example, we can compare the inspection data up to year 2020, and then we compare the inspection data up to year 2021. Now this would help us because what we are doing basically is that we are training the model on the database that's up to 2020, and then we are using the new inspection data that's available in the database of 2021 in validating the performance of this deterioration model. So that's why we have two databases here, and also we have to load the IDs. This because the software in the background automatically generate IDs for the structures. And the reason behind this is just to ensure consistency, because some structures IDs, some databases, they would have non-numerical input in the ID itself. So that's why the software automatically generate IDs, and that would replace the original IDs. And the ID file here is really to ensure the mapping or shows the mapping between the automatically generated ID and the original ID of the database. So let's go ahead and load the files. We have here, so first we're going to start with the older database, 2020. We'll go sorted, and right away we'll receive a load menu to load the IDs file. So we have structures ID. And then we go ahead and load the new database. So this is 2021. And also automatically we will get a loading menu to load the structures ID. So we've loaded these files, and we're done with the file loading process. Now we move on to the table under. So here we have the table, which include the model parameters, the general ones, and these also we get from the model training toolbox. So here I've loaded the file already in the MATLAB workspace. I'm just gonna copy these values. So I would go ahead and input these values. So 1.02 for sigma condition, and then I have the speed is 0.05, the acceleration is 0.245, and the expected value for the initial speed is 0, expected value for the initial acceleration is 0. Finally, the minimum or the speed intercept is 0.15, and n is 4. Now, as you'd see, there are different rows in this table, and these rows, the input here are really optional, and the purpose of it is really to be able to kind of see the effect of changing one of these parameters on the model performance. So in order to change from one set to another, we have to choose like the active set of parameters from this list. So this list would tell the software which row I should take my input from. Now this is for all for the input. As you'd see here, we have some options for the output. So we have plot time series, and what this would do if I click on the checkbox is that while the software is running the analysis, the validation analysis in the background, it will plot a number of time series, and the number is, as defined here, 500, could be changed to 50 or as desired. Now that's for one of the inputs. However, there should be a consideration that if this option is activated, then the validation analysis would be a little bit slower. Now, this is for the output part. There's also a part that we can actually see the inspector's parameters. So if I click here on the histogram, I can see the estimated sigma v for the inspectors, and it's really taken from the file that I've loaded in the beginning. So this is what the role of this figure here. Finally, if I'm done with the input, I can click on Run Analysis, and the software would run analysis, and it will show a set of figures and graphs that would tell me about the quality of and performance of my model. And the log likelihood or the LL output text box here really report the log likelihood of the new inspections that are in the new database. So the log likelihood associated with the new inspections given the model that we've trained on the older dataset. So the new inspections, I mean inspections that the model, the deterioration model throughout the training have never observed and never used, basically. So again, as I mentioned, after clicking the run analysis, the figures would show, and all these figures with their corresponding description are documented in the PDF manual associated with the software.